You know, we spent a lot of time talking. We spent a lot of time talking about issues, and when it comes to the federal level, obviously there's a lot of change happening in Washington right now with the new president, some new members of Congress, and folks that are trying to figure some things out. And when you look at the turnover in administrations, that always leads to a lot of change anyway. You add in that you have a new political party in charge, in charge of the executive branch, that leads to a lot of new changes, especially when it comes to executive office positions. And then you throw in the current president, which he's never done anything like this before, has no experience in government, and it has lent itself to a really unconventional way of looking at policy making. And so, and that's not talking about the president's Twitter account. That's just everything else. It's there's just a lot of different things. You put in all the legislative priorities that we have, that other folks have, and you tie that in with the work that the Congress has to get done, specifically the Senate, when it comes to presidential appointments. Again, we have a new president, and so we have a whole lot of new, besides just your typical secretarial positions, Secretary of Ag, EPA Administrator, Urban Affairs and Education and Interior and all those folks. You have the political appointees that are underneath there. And that is literally, in terms of the folks that need still Senate confirmation, hundreds of individuals that need Senate confirmation. We still don't even have the full cabinet elected yet, so you add in the cabinet officials, plus the hundreds of individuals that still need to be approved by the Senate. And then you tie in with all the other presidential appointees that aren't subject to Senate confirmation, but there's just a lot of new folks coming into a lot of these positions, and that can slow things down. This president has a long list of things he'd like to get done, a long list of things I know he'd like to get done fairly quickly, but there's a lot of folks that need to get in place before some of those things can happen. Now, obviously, the president's accomplished quite a bit. Has been moving right along with executive orders, and Congress is working through some things. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our priorities. And you can see by the title of the presentation, I'd like to know why you need to care about these things, because it is awfully important. When you look at a lot of these things impact to agriculture generally, American agriculture, Nebraska agriculture, but really more so specifically to you individually as farmers and ranchers. So like I said, run through these things fairly quickly. I don't want to take up a lot of folks' time today, but we'll go ahead and start things off. Jay, do you have to move it, or do I have to move the slideshow?
Yep.
I guess I can do it.
Okay. You've got it right there.
I don't see a whole lot of information on this PowerPoint, and that's on purpose so you can focus in more so on what I'm telling you. Why you should care about agricultural trade. It's a pretty big topic, and the president has spent a lot of time talking about trade and his desire to not only have free trade but fair trade, a conversation that has been had for a while. But it is agriculture benefits very much so from international trade. American agriculture does. And I've used this talking point time and time again, and many of you have probably heard me say it. But the reason the U.S. agriculture benefits from trade is because we can produce high quality ag products, as you all know. But we also produce an unbelievably high quantity of that high quality. And so that makes us the most competitive agricultural exporter in the world. And you look at beef, you look at corn, soybeans, pork production, all of those industries, a lot of it are, again, very focused in on Nebraska, very dependent on agricultural trade. About 30% on average of the, about 30 cents on the dollar that you all receive for your product is a result of trade. And I could go through numbers and show you the growth. But I'll just start talking about basically three items in the trade purview that I think you all need to care about, that you need to pay attention to. The president has moved on and pulled the United States out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We'll start there. TPP was going to be another trade victory for the United States, mainly because Japan was involved. And for Nebraska, we were expecting about $378 million in additional ag trade. Most of that was focused in on the beef industry. Again, Japan being involved. The current tariff on U.S. beef going into Japan is just under 40%. TPP would have dropped it down to 9%. It would have made a very big difference. And I'll talk about actually South Korea in a second to show you how fast that market has grown with a tariff schedule that was roughly the same. The numbers from there, and show you what could have been when it comes to Japan. But that the president followed through with the campaign promise and pulled us out of the TPP. Now it's time for the president to get back to negotiating bilateral agreements like he said he was going to do. The U.S. Trade Rep they have scheduled a hearing for Mr. Lighthouser, the U.S. Trade Representative, who needs to be confirmed by the Senate yet. They've scheduled that for later on in a couple weeks, and that's a positive sign to begin this process of signing bilateral free trade agreements. And Japan is the first one on the list that we talk about, first one the president has talked about. Again, the main reason being is that Japan is a large importer of U.S. ag products from our perspective. From the president's perspective, obviously cars and technology, things like that. That's where the president seems to be a little bit more focused in on. But obviously ag trade with Japan is going to be big, and big for Nebraska, especially because of the amount of beef that Japan currently imports and how high the tariff is right now on U.S. beef. So that's an area we want to focus in on. The president has also spent a lot of time talking about NAFTA and wanting to renegotiate NAFTA. And it is something that we oppose as an organization. The reason being is that agriculture has seen massive trade gains when it comes to trade with Mexico and Canada. We've seen an increase of well over 200% on a real dollar basis in terms of the amount of ag products we have shipped to those two countries. Those are our two largest trading partners in a lot of ways, in the top end for not only the United States but also Nebraska as well. We ship a lot of in the top five, I should say. I think they're like 2 and 3 is where they are, not number 1. But if you look at the product that we ship over there, $1.4 billion worth of soybeans, $1.1 billion. Those are general trade numbers, but NAFTA consumes a large portion of that. And we have seen, Mexico in and of itself are the second largest purchaser of corn, the third largest purchaser of soybeans, fourth largest purchaser of beef. We've seen massive increases since NAFTA started. Over a 2,000% increase in the amount of pork that we send, an increase in the amount of pork that we send to Canada, a 1,200% increase in the pork that we send to Mexico. We ship 129% more beef to Mexico and 94% more beef into Canada. These numbers are really across the board. We've seen massive gains there. And so if the president is set on trying to renegotiate NAFTA, agriculture needs to make sure we have a seat at that table, needs to make sure that we do not lose the gains that we have had. And so we're going to be paying very close attention to that, make sure that we are talking about it. But NAFTA is a very, very important agreement for us, and we hope that, again, the benefits, the gains that we've made do not go away. I mentioned South Korea briefly, and I'll talk about that. Some of the results are in. We passed that free trade agreement a few years ago, and I think it really, to talk through the numbers there, really highlights what we are talking about when it comes to Japan. So before we passed the free trade agreement with South Korea, we exported about $582 million worth of beef. So that was back in like 2012, 2013. We shipped about $582 million worth of beef. The tariff schedule is roughly the same when it comes to Japan. South Korea's tariff schedule on U.S. beef was about the same, about 40%. And now we immediately dropped. We're in the 20s, so about 26.7% roughly. And that's going to continue on the path to drop all the way down to 9%. Again, the same tariff schedule reduction that we would have seen with Japan. So in just over a couple years, with the tariff still relatively high, we have doubled our beef exports to South Korea. We're now at $1.1 billion last year. You could have expected roughly the same type of thing to happen. That's roughly what we were talking about. when it comes to Japan. So that's why, in our mind, we need to make sure that we're working on that Japanese trade relationship quickly because of the gains that could be made there. The President has talked about wanting to look at the U.S.-South Korean Free Trade Agreement. Again, it's been a big boost for agriculture. All of these free trade agreements have been a big boost for agriculture. And this isn't the primary industry. Our industry is not the primary industry that the President talks about when he talks about wanting to make sure trade is fair and free trade agreements haven't been fair. No one can say that free trade has benefited absolutely every industry. But when it comes to agriculture, it absolutely has benefited us, so we need to make sure that we protect those gains. So that's where we are on trade. That's a quick run through, and we'll answer any questions that folks have there. The next Farm Bill is also important, and the reason it matters to you is not just the simplicity of going through each individual title. And we could talk about our county and some of those things. We could talk about the importance of crop insurance, and all that stuff is important. But what the Farm Bill, as you all know, does is it creates certainty in the food sector. It creates certainty in terms of providing an agricultural safety net to farmers and ranchers who produce the food. And tie that in is that it has created a safety net for individuals, low-income individuals, with the SNAP program. And as we all talk about time and time again, the SNAP program continues to consume more and more of that overall Farm Bill budget. Nearly 80% today. I think it's like 75% right now is where the Farm Bill, in terms of what SNAP consume or nutrition programs consume of the overall Farm Bill total. But the marriage of these two things continues to be important, and not just because they both deal with food, obviously, but if you look at the political layout and you look at where we were at in terms of how many ag state House members we have, how many folks in elected office that have an agricultural background, how many of those serve in Congress, that number continues to decrease every year. And so we need to make sure that we are maintaining the allies that we have, and we need to make sure that we are continuing to broaden our coalition when it comes to the Farm Bill, and the food and nutrition title has been a very good way for us to do that. That's not to say that we don't believe that there needs to be some reforms there. That's not to say that we don't think that changes could be made in that title to improve the efficiency of it, reduce overall spending. We advocated for all those things in the last Farm Bill, but keeping those two together has been important. Now, the other part that I will say, and I'm going to keep this fairly general, is we laid out a very clear plan of what we want in the next Farm Bill, a fairly clear plan as to what we want in the next Farm Bill at the AFBF annual meeting back in January. We wanted to continue to support programs like the Our County program, the PLC program, the Price Loss program, those Title I programs that you had the choice to sign up for. We maintain support for those. We maintain support for federal crop insurance, again, probably in Nebraska's mind, the most important component of a Farm Bill, the most important component of an agricultural safety net, and so that's been extremely important for us. You go in through conservation. The CRP program continues to be important. We had a significant decrease in the amount of acres allowed in that program after the last Farm Bill. We passed supporting maintaining that current acreage level. I know there's been a lot of groups that have wanted to increase it, but our delegates decided to keep it where it is. You move through rural development and the energy title and all those different things that all come together as to we kind of had a position on each one of those things. I will tell you from a commodity perspective, again, crop insurance is a major important thing for us. You go through the Our County program, time and time again we've heard about the county-to-county disparities that exist. This county got a really good sized payment, and this county didn't get everything. Part of that is the nature of a county, individual county program that exists on how that works and how individual county yield averages trigger a payment. That's been important. Again, as we look into the next few years, we've had fairly good size Our County payments in the state of Nebraska. Very significant Our County payments, to be quite honest, in a lot of areas. But moving forward with how the program works, the lower crop prices catch up to us. They enter into the average. We lose those multiple high years and the current trend of where we're at with lower commodity prices that catches up to us. And so, as we look into who may receive a payment this next year, we'll probably see some, but especially in years 4 and 5, there really probably will not be much to any our county payments unless we see drastic changes in where commodity prices are at. So that is something to keep in mind. The PLC program, a lot of talk about that, mostly in the southern region of the United States. Those are an important component for peanut and rice producers. But as we move into this, you know, we're looking at producer decisions that we find a new farm bill. If programs roughly continue, you all will probably have another choice between signing up for the R County program or the PLC program. There's a very low likelihood that the R County program will trigger a payment again unless we see some changes. And so we're probably going to see a lot of Nebraska producers take a much harder look at the PLC program because it provides some level of protection against lower you know, prices at the elevator. So we'll have to see what happens moving forward. A lot of talk there, but one of the things that we're trying to decide is how we can still make some improvements to the Farm Bill, but at the same time also living in a budget reality where we have less money to spend. And I can talk about that if folks have questions on that. But that's kind of where we're at on the Farm Bill for today. And again, I can answer questions if folks have them. Immigration reform. You know, I have the opportunity to travel around the state quite a bit. As you all know, you see me all out and about. And as you kind of weed through and weed past some of the big stuff, you know, when you talk to farmers about challenges outside of, you know, property taxes and outside of regulations and some of those things. When you talk to folks, the biggest thing that I hear more often than not is the need to get an employee that you can actually find one who's dependable, who actually wants to do the work and who will actually show up. And when we talk about immigration reform, a lot of times this is, you know, deemed a California issue or a Texas issue. And on the agricultural labor front, you know, this is a produce issue. But I will tell you again that, you know, you can take it right down to the individual farm level in the state of Nebraska with a you know, a farm that has one, maybe two employees. It is difficult to find someone who wants to show up. You talk to feedlot owners, you talk to hog facilities or poultry facilities, the same type of thing. It is difficult to get locals that want to do the work and who will actually show up each day. And so that is where you've seen a lot of agricultural producers turn to a migrant labor workforce. And in terms of Farm Bureau priorities on this, and I've talked about this in the past, our priorities aren't centered on the things that are making headlines. It's not the sexy stuff like building a wall or citizenship versus, you know, legal status or all that type of stuff that you hear about in the news every night. And it's not that that stuff isn't important. It absolutely is. And we have policy positions on all that stuff. We support building a border wall. We support border security and some of those types of things. But you look at the bigger impact on agriculture, it is finding workers. And so I talked about it from a Nebraska perspective. Let's go back to the larger area where you have California's, the produce farms, who need a couple hundred farm workers to try to pick lettuce and squash and strawberries and some of those things that you can't harvest mechanically. There is a massive labor shortage out there in America, especially on farms and ranches. The amount of product that is left to rot in the field is a real thing. It is a real problem in those states that grow a large portion of this country's produce. And trying to get a legal workforce is extremely important to us. It is one of our top 5 issues. And we don't talk about it a lot because we don't have, you know, the number of produce farms. But again, you talk about the feedlot industry, the livestock industry generally, or the individual farmer who maybe has one employee. You know, they may not go for the migrant individual, the migrant labor folks, but that doesn't mean that labor or the shortage of labor on a farm or ranch is not a problem. And so, you know, when we talk about this issue, we talk about trying to make sure that agriculture has a ample supply of legal workers. And so that is why, in our minds, it's a top-tier issue. That is why, you know, we think everyone should pay attention to this issue, probably far more so than we have in the past. We'll have to see where the president is and what he wants to do, what Congress comes up with in terms of an immigration package and where agriculture fits in. Again, we have some pretty distinct needs, and we're going to continue to advocate to make sure that we're paid attention to when it comes to the immigration issue. Tax code reform is also a big one for us. And you know, it goes as you know, you go through different bits and pieces, and the president has been working with the House Ways and Means Committee on coming up with a package. Last year, a few years ago, the Ways and Means Committee, where Congressman Smith, Congressman Adrian Smith, our 3rd District Congressman, sits on, released a trial balloon package. The idea, the concept, is reducing rates and spreading out, you know, the tax burden across the board, reducing the number of different tax loopholes and some of those things. And you know, we're supportive of those. But we also are working to make sure that some of the things that we rely upon, the individual pieces of the tax code that we support, Section 179, you know, the ability to reinvest money back into your business, you know, some of those bonus depreciation, some of those things remain. It's a good talking point to try to talk about flattening the tax code, but there are a lot of pieces, especially for agriculture, that remain extremely important. And so we're working to protect those. You know, we also are supportive of trying to come up with some capital gains tax reform and trying to do some fixes there. We're trying to, of course, eliminate the death tax, another burdensome tax on agriculture. And so we continue to work with the House Ways and Means Committee on that, and you'll see more from us moving forward. There's a lot of talk, going back to trade and taxes, combining the two, a lot of talk about a 20% border adjustment tax. It's something that we don't have policy on currently. We're still examining the issue. I'd say pay attention to Jay Rempe's Economic Tidbits newsletter. There's going to be some information on that in the upcoming weeks here, kind of introducing the issue, what it is, and how what kind of war agriculture fits in with that concept. You know, we will need to dive into that more as an organization, and need some policy direction from you all as to where you think we need to be on something like that. So kind of stay tuned there. The last thing I want to talk about is a big one, obviously, for us, and that's healthcare reform. And you know, you look at where we're at in this debate. House Republicans just released their plan yesterday and laid out exactly what they'd like to do with a replacement plan. It is a fairly comprehensive plan when you look at what they had tried to do. The President supports it. We've had a couple of our members of our delegation support it. Don Bacon and Adrian Smith have supported it. But, you know, they're looking to hold hearings on this fairly quickly. And, you know, this is not by any means the only part of the conversation. This isn't going to be the final bill. There will be some changes. But I'm going to walk through a couple of these things with you as to what they're looking at. And I can talk to you a little bit of how Farm Bureau policy fits in a little bit with some of this. So obviously, first and foremost, the individual mandate is going to be eliminated. That's something that's been talked about for a long time, as well as a series of taxes that have been used to pay for the Affordable Care Act, medical devices, tanning, and other things like that. So they're going to try to eliminate some of that. The requirement for employers to purchase health insurance for their employees is going to go away. The plan does maintain coverage for pre-existing conditions, forces coverage for pre-existing conditions, but imposes new penalties on folks who don't renew their health insurance coverage after so long. So it's a little bit different. There are different subsidies. They change how the subsidy schedule works. You know, before it was individuals got their subsidies on an individual basis. It converts it from the focus is now more so on age versus income, and so that's a new way to look at it. So if you were above a certain income level, you were ineligible for a subsidy. The change that they wanted to try to make was do this more so from an age factor to make things a little bit more equitable across the board. So you know, there's still a lot to be, you know, and that's just a small part of what they're trying to do. Obviously, this is a big piece of that, but that's kind of a quick rundown on some of the major components. But, you know, the thing for us continues to be cost. And there's still some analysis that needs to be done as to whether or not these changes will create the cost savings that are necessary. You know, when it comes to agriculture, you know, this has been a growing issue in terms of the cost of health insurance. You know, there's a lot of talk. I think this plan is split in terms of its political approval. You've got the far-right groups, Heritage and others, who have opposed this thing. You have far-right Republicans in Congress who have said they won't support it. And you have Democrats that obviously hate it as well as any changes to the Affordable Care Act that they seem to be opposed to. So we're going to have to see what the future holds for this proposal. Again, this is not the end of this conversation by any means. There is nothing in this legislation that addresses the ability to purchase health insurance across state lines. We'll have to see. There's a lot of emphasis on health savings accounts, which I know a lot of farmers and ranchers take advantage of. And so we're going to continue our analysis on this. We're going to continue to dig into it and see how it aligns with our policy objectives. I'll tell you right now, some of it does, some of it doesn't, so we'll have to see. This issue is definitely moving, and I would expect to see some real things happening in the upcoming weeks here. You'll definitely be hearing about it on the national news as to what's happening with this bill, and definitely we'll make sure the Farm Bureau is talking about it, because it obviously affects our members very, very directly. So that's it for me.